of my comrades, my friend, somebody that I look up to from far. I remember when I attended University of the Gambia, a lot of people told me a lot about him. And then I was fortunate enough to meet him a couple of years ago. And we have a lot of discussions. From there, I admire him a lot, a lot. And I believe today our audience as well are going to learn a lot from this gentleman. Without much ado, I will just allow our guest to introduce himself to our audience and our viewers in the Gambian diaspora. My boss, you're welcome to our podcast.
Thank you very much, Aliu, for giving me the opportunity to be in your very important platform and for giving me the opportunity to speak to an issue that is very dear to me. Basically, my name is Mohamed Lamin Diba. I'm a Gambian currently based in Switzerland. I hold a master's degree in international and development studies from the Geneva Graduate Institute and over 10 years span of experience across working with civil society organizations, the governments, and international organizations working on migration and social protection issues. I'm also extending my warmest greetings to your viewers wherever they are. Thank you for
Thank,
joining us.
thank you so much. Thank you for giving us pleasure for being here with us. Comrade, without much ado, we will just you to take us through about your education journey. When did you realize that migration it is something that you really have a passion for and you wanted to follow it? Was it about the experience that you have seen your colleagues, your comrades, the family members take on this perilous journey to get to Europe? And as a result, you said, look, I am going to study this so that I can be an advocate, so that I can be a voice for those individuals. Tell us the passion. When does it come?
Well, it came in different folds. One, my dad himself was an irregular migrant well before I was born, and I have several discussions with him taking this very treacherous Sahara Desert route across the Mediterranean to enter into Europe. Well, but what in fact inspired me the most was when before I completed my undergraduate degree, I was about to write my undergrad dissertation. So I made consultations with my professor, Dr. Ismail Assise, and seek his opinion as to what he think I should write about. So at that time, he felt the need that I should write about involuntary immobility. That is, young people who aspire to migrate, but they do not have the ability to do so. And as a result, they were at home for a long period of time without jobs and so on. So eventually, they become so redundant. Um, should they go interview? Ali, sorry about that. Hi, Momodu. Good. Um, so then I decided to write about involuntary mobility and its consequences on youth unemployment. That sparked my interest in migration discourses. And then, fast forward, when I completed my undergraduate degree, I started an internship at International Organization for Migration, where I focused on awareness raising campaign against irregular migration. So I was coordinating um, irregular migration centers, migration information centers in the Lower River region and the West Coast region of the Gambia. So I've heard stories of irregular migrant returnees and potentially irregular migrants. So I felt the need that this could not also be a lived experience from my parents' perspective, but there could be something I can do about it. Then I decided to scope into the internet to look at universities abroad that offers migration studies. So I came across the Geneva Graduate Institute that offers Masters in International and Development Studies in the specialization of mobilities, migration, and borders. And then I went to Geneva Graduate Institute in Geneva to study migration. And whilst there, actually, I was able to do discourses and practices in international organizations, focusing specifically on IOM. So I try to understand how the institutions operate and what mechanisms and strategies they put in place to ensure that safe pathways for irregular migrants, but also the partners like European unions they have been working with. So I've been involved in few conversations at the European delegation in Geneva, looking at migration from the Mediterranean perspective. Um, then from there, actually, I started an applied research project with the Global Protection Cluster on forced return and the location of internally displaced populations in Myanmar, Mozambique, Nigeria, and Niger, impacting over millions of people. So most recently, we have seen how irregular migration have caused devastating consequences in our communities and in the sub-region, West Africa in general. So I felt that it's no longer a lived experience from a family perspective or from an academic perspective, but it's a calling for us to add our voice to ensure that there are mechanisms in place to put a stop to this route.
Wow, that's incredible, comrade. Without much ado, I will just trying to tailor it down to the Gambian perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I want our discussion to be centered on the Gambia today.
Mm-hmm.
I know you've done a lot of research. You have consulted so many scholarly articles with regards to migration and the impacts of migration. But in the
Mm-hmm.
Gambia, in early 2000s, people were using the other routes to get to Europe by using, land to go all the way to Libya and then try to get the boat and then get to Europe. But now the trajectory has changed. The road has changed. When you see, I know both of them involve so many risks, but when you see people started succumbing to, traveling to Europe through sea by being in the boat for almost a week or 2 weeks, um, what's your take on that? Do you think that using the sea is safer than that of using the land to get to Europe?
None of these modes, none of these modes of mobilities are safe, actually. Like you mentioned, from the early 80s to 2000s, a lot of people who migrated across the Sahara Desert. Normally, they began their journey from the Gambia, then to Senegal, then Mali, Guinea-Bissau, then Niger, where most of them hire smugglers. At the end of the day, they were smuggled, and then to the North African countries like Algeria, Libya, where they finally boarded the Mediterranean to Europe. Eventually, most of them lost their lives. Some of them were extorted. Women mostly face sexual harassments and rapes. They never get to live a dignified life anymore in the whole of their lives. So most recently, actually, especially in contemporary irregular migration route, Gambia have become a very critical departure point for citizens within the sub-region, um, particularly from Guinea, Senegal, and Mali. We've seen recently in Jinak, they bought a boat for 7 days using wooden boats. I mean, so I wonder how they even use the restroom, if there is any. So it's very risky and it's very deadly, and I don't think anybody need to sacrifice your life to use the irregular migration route in order to seek for opportunities elsewhere in Europe. Actually, I think lack of information about the prevailing circumstances in Europe, and then sometimes peer pressure as well as family pressure is what fuels irregular migration routes by most of the young people. And then we use now that Europe have in fact started to, in fact, for far too long. I mean, many years now, Europe have externalized their borders to third national countries like Libya, Tunisia, etc. And now they've been using Frontex to push back this. But even in the event that you made it to Europe, basically, you need to seek for asylum. That's your best option. And seeking asylum basically doesn't guarantee you a refugee status. It could be rejected. And when that happens, there has a high chance that you'll be repatriated back home. But even if your asylum is accepted, you have to go through a huge transition to be integrated into the European communities and systems. So
But
that
that's why
makes it
I
very
want our
long.
discussion to focus more on, because there are
Mhm.
lots of false hope and false narrative about Europe and whatnot. Even those who
Mhm.
made to Europe, they made them to believe that, you know, that is it is everything. Everything is actually available here. I remember
Mhm.
somebody told me that people thought that in 80s, in 90s, people thought that when you get to New York, you work on silvers and golds, to get to your work and stuff like that. They do not know that, you know, it's another hustle different from Gambia. Sometimes Gambia might even be better than what you're gonna find in Europe or European countries. So take us through about some of the things that fuel young people, that agitated young people to have this belief that, look, I am gonna go, even if I'm gonna die in a river, it's even better than staying in the country. What are some of those social factors, and then it's not only economics. What are those social factors?
Well, most of the social factors, basically, it comes down to peer influence. Like, for instance, if Alu Job is in Europe, once in a while, Alu Job takes beautiful pictures and posts it on social media without even uttering a word. The perception deceives people that Alu is living a dignified life and he is accomplished, which is actually very far from the truth. And another social factor is that most of the Gambian communities having a family member in Europe is a sign of prestige and honor. And basically, you see people who return back home around December, January time are called semesters. They're the ones who marry the beautiful girls, have the beautiful cars, actually, and live in a very luxurious life. So they don't give accurate information about Europe to the young aspirants who wanted to undertake this irregular migration route. So as a result, they become instigated and they feel that they need to go and have immediate success in Europe, which is actually one of the major social problems. And also, there is what we call family problem, family issue. A family put huge financial burdens on their people, especially male children, right?
Mhm.
So with this huge financial burden, they feel that they need to take the responsibility of the family, and as a result, to escape that pressure, most of them undertake this journey so that they can emancipate their families from poverty and then elevate their social status in their communities. Another social factor which is also very crucial, we have to put at the back of our mind, is that it's our communities itself, right? So sometimes you live in a community, where you are not valued and respected, where you are not married actually. So society frowns at you, you are not being involved, you are being alienated from certain aspects, certain privileges within the community. So you feel that the only thing that could let you emancipate yourself from these alienations and have your social prestige is to go to Europe and live, is go to Europe, work, earn money, and come and live that dignified life. But you believe that when you return back home, society would value you, would respect you, and will give you credence. So these are social issues that inspire people and motivate people and then want them to go.
Comrade, having noticed that a lot of family members are in a very sorrowful moment as we are speaking,
Mhm.
how do you think family feels when it comes to the departure of their loved ones? At the end of the day, they don't
Well,
hear them anymore.
obviously they will be very sad. It's very painful to lose a family member. But if you look at this new trend, especially the reports that we have been getting from communities and from online sources, from very credible sources, families in fact contribute immensely to agitate these young people to marry, because sorry, to migrate, because sometimes this irregular migration route is not only about individual decision, it's about a household decision. Families come together to decide that you have to go take this route and emancipate the family from poverty. Like I mentioned initially, because of the family responsibilities that most of the male children shoulder in their families, that is what inspired, motivate, and encourage them to undertake this irregular migration route, right? So this is a major issue. So obviously, in between, if you lost your family member, a male child of the family lost it to the Mediterranean Sea or the Sahara Desert, you'll obviously be sad because you seen that family as the hope who will go and emancipate us from poverty, and eventually person lost its life. So in the first place, we should not encourage anybody to undertake this irregular migration route. It is deadly and it doesn't worth us mortgaging our lives to the sea. But obviously we'll encourage the government and all relevant stakeholders to make sure that there is adequate programs for young people that will enable them to stay and contribute to national development.
Scholars do argue that it's not
Mhm.
only about lack of economic status that is actually
Mhm.
making these people to move to the Gambia. Gambia is relatively safe, and at some point, a lot of people, or most of the people that take on this journey, have means of income. Some of them are police officers, some of them are nurses, some of them are working at government positions. But yet still, they have this phobia, they have this, willingness to leave their job and get to Europe. What do you think? Do you think they are not being handsomely paid, or what they actually have at the end of the month cannot actually sustain them?
Well, it's one of the reasons, right? Underemployment. You are employed, but you are not paid. You felt that you are not paid on the value of your labor, and the only option you are left with is to travel either through the Mediterranean Sea or the treacherous Sahara Desert to enter into Europe and then work and gain money or wealth and to support yourself and to support your family. Right. So an average police officer, actually an average nurse or an average teacher, I mean, salary could not be more than $300 per month. So if you live in Europe, actually earning, especially people who lived in Europe, actually are not exponentially telling the right stories and the right realities that exist or that is obtained in Europe are the very reasons that encourages these individuals to quit their jobs and migrate to Europe. But then, as a result of underemployment, they feel that their pain is not enough. They don't live in a, they don't have a sustainable and a decent job, so they have to quit and come to Europe. Sustainable job is not only about having a job for a long period of time or through retirement, but it's about having an income that sustain you and your family, where you can do savings, pay your bills, and live a healthy and a dignified life without having to obtain loan or to beg anyone. So most of them believe that they are underemployed, they are not paid on the value of their labor. So therefore, the best possible options they have is to migrate to Europe, either through the Sahara Desert or across the Mediterranean to enter into Europe. Some we are fortunate to have visas to travel, visitors visas, right, or holidays visas, but they end up being overstayed. They violate their terms of visas, and then therefore, seek asylums to be able to sit in Europe as residents.
Yes, looking at the Europe today and Europe in 90s, I remember former vice president of the Gambia, said Europe then and now is quite different, and then we can all attest to that. A lot of people have seen so many people, I mean, teaming around, beautiful places in Europe, taking photos and images, thinking that everything is nice and smooth. When I happen to see old people at the age of 60, at the age of 49 to 50, working at the grocery stores or working at the warehouses, you would tend to understand that not everything that we have seen on TV is the reality. Tell us about the perspective of the young people back home in the Gambia, because even whereby they have seen a lot of things happening, people are dying, they still think that there is not the solution. What do you think government should do when you come to policy wise?
Yeah, Europe does not guarantee quick success. First, we have to acknowledge that, right? And secondly, when you come to Europe, Europe is not like the United States of America, where English is English is the official language. I'm not sure if English is the official language, but English is the most spoken language across United States of America, right?
Sure.
But for Europe, it's different, right? You go to countries like Germany, they are Germans, they speak German. Italy, they speak Italian. Sweden, they speak Swedish. So that makes it very difficult, especially coming from the Gambia and within the sub-region. So if you cannot speak these languages, which means you have to learn them, right, as a core part of your integration. So learning language could take a year or two, right? That is if you are accepted as an asylum seeker, as a refugee, then therefore you can get privileges, from the European system, like departments of social to welfare and your municipalities to support you integrate, one, through language courses. And secondly, most of the migrants who migrated through this route are not skilled, right? Some of them are school dropouts, from high school. Some of them recently completed university. And most of these European countries now, they need more of skills and technical workers rather than abstract workers. And then you realize that the education system, there's a huge gap. So now, one, understanding the language, and secondly, getting into the labor force, which means you have to learn new skills that corresponds with the skills of the particular European countries where your asylum is granted or where you're seeking an asylum, right? So that makes it very difficult. So it can take years before you settle it into the system and be able to support yourself adequately. For instance, in Switzerland, I've seen people who have been in asylum for over 5, 6 years. Their asylums are still not being considered, it's still pending. And that is a waste of time. So the amount of money you will use to migrate through this regular migration route, some are saying about 200,000, over 300,000. The least amount of money you could spend would be 50 to 65,000. You could use that and start a business, or you could use that to develop a skill that will benefit you and emancipate you from poverty. a skill that could give you a decent life tomorrow. So I think what we need to understand is not all rosy in Europe. It's not cool and dandy. Most of us who lived here knows about it. A lot of people would come here and then started, I mean, with a master's degree, basically, or with a PhD. You cannot utilize your skill. You eventually resort to doing an Uber, or you go and
Exactly.
work in a grocery store, and then
Hmm.
you become redundant. That skill could have benefited your home country, where you could contribute more to national development. If you cannot get an employment, create something that can provide employment for yourself and others. That's what I believe in. So Europe is basically, they have their policies, they have their programs, right? And then also inflow of we have far right political parties that are emerging or that have already emerged.
Yeah.
We have seen it in Italy, we have seen it in Germany, and we have seen anti-immigration sentiments, which is also very similar in the Gambia, because some European countries see immigrants or irregular migrants as a potential threat to their peace and stability. Some, branded us as criminals,
Hmm.
right? Just like the way we also branded others in our countries as criminals, right? Blaming them on everything that doesn't go right. So
Exactly.
therefore, we have to put these things at the back of our minds, right? So Europe is not all cool and dandy. Before you come, you must have to be very prepared, and you must know the reason why you are coming, and you have to adequately understand the trajectory you have to take. Because learning a different language and then to integrating into the society may take a lot of time than you anticipate.
What will you encourage young people to do? Looking at the migration, for me, I do not think migration is illegal. As far as human nature is concerned, we can move anywhere we want to go. Even Prophet has moved from one point to another point, from Medina to Mecca, and at some point. So, I mean, others are actually trying to find ways to get to Europe by seeking visa and stuff related to that. Do you think Gambian government should cooperate with other European countries to encourage labor migration? We have seen Gambia and Saudi Arabia, Gambia and Spain, involved in the issue of labor migration. But at some level, yeah, according to some report, some of those boys, they decide to find their way. Do you think Gambia government should do more um, coordination when it comes to labor migration to cope irregular migration?
Yeah, well, that is very possible. It's possible what the Gambia government could offer with their counterparts that they want to sign these agreements with. Because the Spain circular migration with the Gambia, it's a complete failure. I think over 39 people went, 36 people came back home, and sorry, 36 people Dutch, and only 3 people came back home, which is very unfortunate because the kind of job also they're doing is these are low paying jobs, picking fruits and so on and so forth. They're not skilled jobs. So I didn't see that as, I mean, technically you will know that when these people go, actually, the probability of them coming back it's very slim. So for government to facilitate that they could come back after their tenure of working or the kind of employment they have, I think they should put in mechanisms together with the Spanish government or with the European Union to ensure that these people do not run away so that they don't spoil opportunities for others. But if you also look at it, the kind of jobs labor they are doing in Spain actually is for me it's unworthy, right? So I think that's a failure on the part of the Gambia government, and I think we could have done better as a country, because a country that labor migration is allowed,
Yeah, even
but it has
America
to
is
be
happening there.
dignified. Yes, it has to be dignified and sustainable.
Mhm.
You understand? So I think the government should also endeavor to make sure that they create pathways, legal pathways for young people to be able to migrate and seek for decent opportunities elsewhere without going through hitches. But also, government needs to create opportunities at home, right? How do they do this? Because you cannot create opportunities without doing needs assessment. The Gambia government, through its line ministries and its satellite agents, like I specifically said this anytime I had a conversation with people, like the National Development Enterprise, the National Social Protection Office, the Ministry of Youth and Sport, and its satellite agencies, the National Youth Council and the National Youth Service Scheme, should work together and establish a very strong foundation and conduct an assessment to deliberately target the most vulnerable and the youth at risk create opportunities for them so that they'll be able to stay in the country and contribute to national development. We should also do our complete, there should be a complete departure from only having abstract trainings wherein wouldn't lead to direct employment of these young people. Because we have had series of trainings of young people in the Gambia,
Exactly.
capacity building trainings that do not yield dividend. So I think we have to move from that, right? And then we see what is sustainable. National Youth Service Scheme, yes, they are training a lot of young people, but what happened to those young people after training them? What kind of skills are you training them? Were they able to create employment for themselves, or are they being able to be absorbed by the government? So these are things that we should put into consideration. So therefore, the role of the social protection there is to make sure that they deliberately target these vulnerable people, youth at risk, women, displaced populations, especially people that have been displaced by devastating effects of climate change in the interior of the Gambia. So therefore, there is the need for a collective union of all these institutions to ensure that we're able to work hard, appropriately, and then solve the intractable problems that our country is faced with.
Yes, comrade. I will bring you back when you come to certain solution that government of the Gambia can actually do to cope
Mm.
or to address irregular migration. But I want us to shift a bit into realities of Gambian people's life. Honestly, being from provincial Gambia, I visited provincial Gambia a couple of years ago. You will
Mm-hmm.
realize that those people are actually suffering, and born in that community or in that setting, you found your parents still farming, just trying to do something better to be able to, sustain themselves, or to be able to provide quality education for their children. At the end of the day, if they are not able to do it, these young people are left with nothing but just to subscribe to what is actually they're actually doing now, that is to take on these irregular routes. If you had to advise those young people, living in that situation, what kind of advice would you put it to them? Because some of them said, well, if you learn vocational skills, you will sit at home for almost a month or two. Nobody's going to employ you. If you learn certain skills, you're not going to do anything. At the end of the day, you're just going to sit at home, brew a tire, or be in a jet or go to field to play football. That is the day-to-day life of, average Gambians in provincial Gambia. What do you think they need to do, and what do you think the government should do policy-wise to be able to make those people very efficient in the society?
Well, this reminds me a lot about my research when we talk about involuntary mobility, right? There are young people who aspire to migrate, but basically they do not have the ability to do so, and they become redundant over the years. So most of these young people who learn skills, you believe in your skills and potentials, create a job because there is a level playing field for you, I believe, right?
Mhm.
So what the government need to also do is to ensure that they provide loans and grants for young people to be able to adequately start, because government have institutions that focus on these things like the National Social Protection Office, right, and the National Youth Council. So what my advice to the young people is that no journey is worth risking your life to the Mediterranean Sea in the name of coming to Europe to earn a better living, because it will still be a waste of time. The time you waste a lot of time traveling, even it is 7 days. After 7 days, you have to go through a rehabilitation center. That could take time. It could take months and years. And then from there, you have to go through the process of asylum. That could also take months and years. So you never know. So, but if you have a startup capital, you could start a small business. But my advice to government is to ensure that they have adequate policies that will address the intractable needs of young people. Gambia today, population of young people is about 60 to 65%, and according to the National Labor Force Survey 2018, our our unemployment rate is 41.5%. You know. Warte, Mamadou. Okay, ein Moment bitte. Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
Danke. Sorry about that. Yeah. So that's the thing, right? So government must be able to ensure that they work with the right stakeholders. One of the policies they should do is there should be because you cannot write a policy, you cannot address people's intractable problems without doing an assessment. Yeah, without doing an assessment, and I think assessment is very critical in this. So once government is able to do assessment, then they will be able to provide That is why I said social protection is very essential in helping Gambia, would be very essential in helping Gambia to address the menaces of irregular migration and unemployment by ensuring deliberate targeting, by creating social registries and digital identities so that we will know which young people needs what. Because opportunities could also be pursuing higher education. It could be providing grants and loans. But when providing these grants and loans, obviously there must be collaterals to ensure its effectiveness,
Mhm.
you know. So I think this is very significant.
Yeah, it should be a collective responsibility. The family
Hmm.
members, friends, brothers, and even the government to work hand in glove with all these sectors or stakeholders to
Hmm.
mitigate irregular migration. It is not the solution. Some of us
Hmm.
who are fortunate to be ahead of, we literally know how people that migrated from other part of the world and now in the United States without skills, with nothing, we know how they end up actually living. Europe, no matter how old you are, you must work in order for you to pay your bills. And in the Gambia, you don't pay bills. Gambia, you can be there, not working for 2 months, and you're not gonna be bothered at the end of the day. It's different from Europe. If you're in Europe today, you fail to work, they're gonna kick you out of your house, and you become a street nigger. So, what do you think we need to do to mount our borders? Because it is not the solution. Like you said, irregular migration is not the solution. Taking this boat to Europe is not going to solve anything. Even those who made it to Europe, you are even better than them. You're living good than that of them. Some other people there, they have been there for 10 years, but you think these are flimsy stories. Just go and visit them. If you have opportunity to travel to Europe through flight, go and visit your brothers and see the kind of work they are doing and the kind of living they're living there. Socially, they are disconnected. No matter how wealthy you are, if you are socially disconnected, your life is worthless. Diba, what do you think we need to do to mount our borders to ensure that these boats they don't depart from the Gambia? What can we do? Because if you have had the incident that happened a couple of days ago, 3 days ago, that a boat moved from Guinea before Bara, they got stuck. When you heard that story, what comes to your mind?
Well, I was very sad to see the list. Um, and then from authentic reports, like the communities have been highly involved in, keeping smugglers in their in their houses, providing every resources available to the potential irregular migrants and protecting them from law enforcement officers. So I feel that the community also need resilience in the first place, right? They must ensure to know that this journey is very dangerous and it shouldn't be encouraged. But also on the side of the government should be able to deploy the border police. We have the immigration, right? Enforcement officers. But this couldn't be achieved without having an immigration law, right? Anti-smuggling law, because I said it a few days ago. Like once we have this anti-smuggling law, it will be a great departure, from where we are to a greater heights of hope. Because then we'll be able to punish smugglers
And
and
prosecute.
those who are involving in smuggling and related crimes. But meanwhile, government could have measures working with sister forces from immigration to navy to ensure that they push back all the boats or intercepted all the boats that are um, attempting to cross the Mediterranean to Europe. And basically, in communities like Jinak, there must be enforcement officers and make sure that community leaders who are involved in this heinous crime of encouraging and also mortgaging our young people to undertake this journey to be punished seriously. So there must be serious consequences because all these things people are stakeholders, right? Communities that harbor these irregular migrants, potential irregular migrants and smugglers, for financial gains, and also yes, for financial gains actually need to be punished according to law, but also irregular migrants and the smugglers were involved in these crimes
Sure.
because it's irregular. I mean, it's not within the framework of the law, so they need to be punished adequately. So we need community resilience one, but we also need adequate laws and institutions to be able to address this. So the immigration and the navy can only be empowered if the anti-immigration bill 2024, sorry, anti-smuggling bill 2024 is approved by the parliament. From there, we could see a huge milestone in terms of curbing irregular migration. But without that, it will be very difficult.
Comrade, we have 15 minutes to go, and then now I would love us to save the discussion in Mandinka language. Um,
Mhm.
you know, I will just pick it up where I stopped. That has to do with the issues of Jinek. Iko fanitiol bukani kadun Jinek, police ol bukani kadun je. I mean, I think this is a propaganda. But do you think, our officers, yeah, I mean, officers will nyana sila kadun sa atel kona purkaja ko ka crime yin ka prevent. Anu yamuna jigi police ol nyana minkela, aning community members ol funding ke purkaja ko kulungol minka bo tundol kantaring. Isi intercept no nyame because personally, it took me 24 hours before I recovered when I heard about the incident. I was in touch with Ibrahim Migration that very night. Akabring Ako, he was trying to reach out to, they were trying to reach out to Navies, Nimbako the police, but he makes don't know. They tried other people to reach out to those people, but they couldn't. It was so sad that this individual from the audio, Bo Nyatanilako, Kabring Kunwanim, accident on Soro, Giokade Kumpalingoto, which means that at that juncture, if rescuers need respond to early, they could have saved 200 plus lives. But unfortunately, they weren't able to save much. They were able to save just like 90 people, less than half. Kabireni incident anymore. What comes to your mind, and what do you think could have been done?
No, yalo ite fama idin din ma ka fo ne ni ko ngodo ite exam o pass la.
Mhm.
Comme wol mo kunna mi role ti drong mulla taw sifal la bare inte damma damma la because police mo immigration mo soldier mo wol be banku do ko la comme ti chol be nyamen drong aden no
Mhm.
sol nen doctor role bari no sol nen doctor role fo fana buka fanu la dum so omo kunna mi role te ka fo ko fanu ti because of o immigration wol nen police wol nen soldier wol la nyanta ka sate o kanta pour sate o tanka mo kurangol ma ne mo jawlo so ntanga mira man sakunda manya ne mira lo kumula and in fact for navy mantaji ni watin kono pour ka multa ki ma ko muna kirela fe man kiri ma mo ko e mobile because I don't touch nakle so mo kunna mi role ti drong so man sakunda nga jiki ko because nga president wala diamol mo la même fo ko ani banku la tanko bundal be do ko kelale abi deploy la ka make sure ko ni situation no melon ko abi takan jinak a situation on nga bang because funding ke jamala ni tutaje so ibaje la fanan ko jinak sati o fanan ko no jinak banko fo kan melia lon ko e ka mul ma ko e pour kanyim batay ani melia lon ko fanan la faka batay sati on ning kabilul ning kan in manya na kason ko mo kurngol ta ke tuje ke mabo ani funding ke melon ko la faka ni ta ka wa fi jiko o manya na kala because ngaje ko mo jamala bi jeme alon ko e be meta fen e be muna fanga kala ko si ke jo kodol so ni okay be fondin ke jamala be kasara la mo jamala ni be kasara la o dum man banko ma ko fen fen na banko to kuru mo abole kila ay ni ko ya bake mo me alon ko e bantanye silo kan be duale fa ala se so e la jama sonya ay la e family man fanan tu koma fo ala se so sabarola ani munyo so kuma ya batal so ngaji ko man sakunda la operation o manya naka nyanta la falal nyanta la falal from immigration anila sister forces all be kafunyu kan kaje ko um yenye back with ya stop and mol me alon ko ka kuduta mol bulu puru saje ko ese mol ma ko mele alon ko ilafta kara nyin silola ani mele alon ko fanan e kanyin silota ka facilitate ka multa ke yolendi ke dundi pulmol kono wolu nyanta tala le punish so man sakunda ta fana ate busaro keno la nyama narra mallu asoto luwa me alon ko abenyin ko tala e bay so wala fulo nyanta kala nyanta ka katale jani nyin sama bonna ngulu wasoto den ngulu wasoto ku jama bi inshallah be
Ba
bo aro bay nola
ba jara lola. Ni hata jibe fana ko mo da mandi serun sa ko wala serun ko. Ya te fana wala Gambian. So det so ka bon kon kono. Bako sade kono, fannin ke jamal finite dara nyim duma sido nyina. Ando anata, sade nyin ay sade mo bla ni ko ya baka tan kono. Atinan bi do mar recover no. Adimina ka wara bake. Ikanu nyo mi alon ko. Ina ba sametri nyo kan. Ike malo wala, ibarin ke ay na ke mo mi ana ko ay duma sido ta. Ayna yema wo nyama yefer ani jama bal bije fo wala ka mara family da nyino nyina suwol kono ita laba dogo wala ita laka kodol ka fonde ka family da nyin ni wol tata e ka bata min du family koma aka wara baka na nyin ka tan koma ba lafta yo fanan e ka tan ya fani mande kan lo fanan nyina amin family ka bata ko min son yara trauma la ila hakilo nyina fanan nyina anim fana ka miro min dundila what's your take on that? What are some of the things me and like family ka they bear it when this happen?
Yalong family farang family jama bije sako ni mudden kewti ibe kabilo kono ibe family kono ye fondin ke klinje kafunyo ma en men kata tata dunta family fanan se mol komandi afa kari flangol be bita kan de na kulung joy fana ita isa je ni tata em bondi bata kono
Mhm.
so family fanan fana ka contribute ba kelem kaje ko ila mole buje sako fondin kewol me bije ta wato do bije ni balanta fam family do bije sa ko tete so fala isi doya e kuma jama fo ma so katin na dul fanan ka wakili kata ke ni ulta ka wa fije so watin nan family jama fo la fondin kewol la dol dun tanak succeed wote bayla bar mo jama la fana niyo tutaje because funding ke killing na niyo tutaje akam tan dol bele niyo tutaje because of funding ke osina ke no menti sama mo lo so be family fana yamar la kanel dingol forcé pour yin kulumota sa man ke ding ke ol drum fonte den kam zul fana jele ka bula nim ba kono kata kam zul fana jele ka bula ba kono kata ko kata ni ndirol la tubabu du anu ni na tubabu du fana ka sone o nyama tubabu du sartol le bije hani lafta mo samala nan ni silola fo se blo sartol no so abe wala nyama so dimbalu dal ye kanta family ye la mul kanta ye tanka ya jibe se opportunity melta ye create no ye pour isaje mel bi dal fa karamo ta karang ni karamo bangi du ko nyini ye mel fana be du ko le ya domanda because dunia mu domanda ngolti ni la faka koronto dron watu do bije man toro sini soto and then nim alamanta manta be abukana akiku so family fana ikana ku kurundin ke memba tinna na bila mol force la musuto kewto pour kanyin silota because aman koy
As migration specialist, imu mold me anno ko ilalondo wane ata back ni ata migration ko ni la sanji tan ko ne bado ko ni kana fo bi jama ibeka musul la ta moy ni mi ata ni ko masilo ni na fana but recently there's high sort of having women. In fact, statistically if I kajale nin kel mu tawor diga tanano be ka muso wala dingo molke dimbal be se ka ke samba Europe o fana ni this new trend kabra keren from the research ye muna sudi o fana ni muna kanyi musul bla tala ni kuli wal ko fana.
hamodro because yeah aketa num ko mantole musul kanale so musu jamala lo mera ko sunko do ndingol dolbe jamani dolbe italy hanen na switzerland jan dolbe jam iba asalomo kono e mang refugee status of coming kamen foy asalomo wala ko inatale ko ilafta kala refugee because ila banko me tankano so e ɓeytala situation o tala ya jiiɓe ya teme quand même fofo toñaren fo toñante anen sa en duniya ɓe gambe ko gambian bankol mbiyan ko kele tije konko tije fen ferendin tije démocratie fanan bijele so ka kolande baake pour kayto soto so mostly musol lañi ñaka tota mo jama ka wala use pour ka kayto soto o fanan sa en adi yango siyata gambia tubabol mantara laring ala baake fas famu toñate fati toñate so aka sañi jamata janila asaro mo accept la so mel fana bi je e ba kono jang wala bu ka tonya fo mo le mel ko be suwo kono e ka ko nyim beta e ka be so nandi comme ka tan ko atu ba bole bu den lambe siri jande be tenne wara ko man taraw nyam so hakil tu ba so ndem fa la sun ko ndingol e anin kam bandingol be ye hakilu tu ba ke e kana tariya ka duma silota e kana silota le mu me because man ni yo se bono silo kan ni bo ni obata silo kan ila dimba ila family pertita ita fon pertita fulan jama ni nata tubabu du jang asita sanyi jama la janni ilafta family men fon ma ko ila ni ala manta be asinita sanyi jama la itina itlafta me men xametina kenula so ndeme men fula dron koronto ngam bete ya mo ya doma ila kol kanyandi yemen soto ye dawoto anan be pare fanan ibe doko men nakana tari akila doko bula o doko nyen mole mol jela gambia mele alon ko ye palasul mara ya kata bo palasul kono le tare karante la londul la fa saybe banku doko wala mo be nyaabe bori fe moli horma moli bunya bo fana se kenole so ngakata ngana koronto because ni wonta kana ke banko per rolte ake family fani perso dum ba mona fa yeah
Mr. Diva, bakaja kumfala in two questions. Tikoniara
mm.
jibe momin from Katame can make to Europe. All boko but about the family can even if you get to Europe, until be tatalu konyo kan nemiano ko mala wal beya. You don't see any different with Molmial no ko iba Gambia ba hasul kam. There are people min for like a business of the Gambia, business all on the Gambia. All yana be la kodalo, iba sabatrin life kono life mi anno ka bede ada bake dina kata min mulde min falna ko mala wal beyal ika dolje mala saba mala nan beya ila ko dal fon kono kuranti je ika dolje la mala lulu beya ila life mam mo nyabo fengo fen hada badi so da fengo miti bo so da andu barako ni tamo man kili dol tamata lay imanna barko so de dol tamata imanna firion so de an dol sabade da bago ka wal kere moldi mi anno ko biye femba so mi anno kan senegal messi mo lono je to nyalamu tama siro ka dum mobile so ko fanninke level do ba fatala je babul damn I have to go look at diba jiba ba nyari nyama freshly nyami so I want to look the same like this or never ka career food wa mon song because of mina for but no you gotta push it a little bit ni ha push do manera ka ba sonyala andu jamaaje may ga fanninge je mi anno ke katama wala tama ko sonya mon mimbul jama wal bi je sondo karam wala ni yara karam bay lafa ka tama kara karam la fala ka sonya no bake mobe mage kala nadi mobe de kino la kala nadi ban yela business o fana muta bult i bultan nim fulora ika kodol min kafuni nyokan ko ya fanyami wuli kemela mu wuli keme wul talulu wosa taxi sanwe mol mi anake ba taxi drive wala gambia banko ka wali mum mol di mi anako bi alhamdulillah ika do mo re konton e simo so janim be nen kala no question do la telefon akere na nu serun ko sankon dada do mor dio la sadil to tendi bakaw ma fon ka jikal ma fon mero ba kumbo kan aka ke mana dinke ta da be fala je kon ita ta da yewol du so kon ita bo ye dingol be number ila muso number ye dingol number ye fama number ye bama number ila tama fonta min boni do kam bi kon ita fonta da fedun da europe ita da mo sanne fama malan jala ba gamme minana ke mo do se fama na fon be jambar mo do sam fama so it just so funny and then it doesn't worth it aman jara njikita mo nyen na kata kudo tele ba ko min do ya kata nya so be nyama ya sabati ya doko ke to mando ba to aba so yalla demande so I mean nyin kala mon la feke nyin kamina wala mi an ka ba dending ba ni ba fodnin kel ya marabi surtout mol mi yalla ko wala biye ba plano so pour kata nyin ko masido nyin na because kacha meta kelale but fe man jarano what do you think we need to do al mamolu pour kata kudu bol to bang wala masa kunda from minister from findi député de findi ning fondin kel nyo kawanya na kacha na joko bataba dunia la belt what would be your recommendation ni ara jibe pour ka ko ning ko mi alno ko bolo kon standing sa ma fa no nyami because ke ko
Well,
ma fa ne jeko
follow fomansa kundale kisikiro ke ya jibe fonnin ke olbe sulala menna because bayri ni ya jibe bi gambia sidla keme o sidla keme ko fonnin ke olmo taworo ani lulu an fonnin ke me mandu ko soto wolle man tara fenna atata le fo sidla tannan nin killing ani lulu don't ani lulu I'm sure nga ma fo nga fo kule but as a siano wotile kodi so fo man sakunda se kisikiziro ke because man sakunda bundal le soto me yalo ko se kisikiziro ke no ne fo ninke lo ko jibe to be sula la menna e fo ninke ma ko fo do ko lem bang fo karango lem bang fo be don to la bang e business o start o sifa be pare fanan ni nata jibe ning paragon e kacha do soto no ako hani tara jamangol kono imamul kafol al ngadu wata malali so katin na ko fondin kel melan ko be so ko man tama fanan ka hame pour yeta so ba fola almamol fanay ko ni be membaro kan isa fondin kel ya marikana du masilota wade fondin kel man fanan be so ko no se duwe fola se so barako la je alay so nafulo la je be fen kudo alay de maje e yuro waso to je anim fanko bari moment tamata to nyalam c'est doit ala so manta be wala même fana be so ko no c'est doit fana ala fana so manta be wala bari ning ala wol be so manta be wala hani o abe sata wala nafala so al mamulu aning sata wol alfalu wajibo le muy be kan ka dinol yamar ka fon ning ke yamar pour mo kana nyota ka wafi kata nyin silola because be banko perdinde lale ita wuluta sata o men to aboto perdinde lale asa dunia fana be fo perdinde so aman jara so wala be kala na yamaroti basically
sorry ko ina be kala nyin kara but fense nyin kany na masakunda ye nyaku ya bake ko ni ada immigration nyin na bada ku jamal la lital fonka so dunia da jibe inin bantala banko la badi ala fanala do imak international relation expert bari mo migration expert la de andu niada jibe ni migration ni atala kanyum body la banko kantari na jale america banko e gambe ton pour kadum america banko kan andu banko jamal bi jembe alna ko e gambia ton fenten for new migration issues me and Nakola Kasab. What is going to be your take on that? And that's going to be your last question.
Um, Aliu, yalong to yalam, mbafula specific la America. Actually, wale ko visa restriction ke banku dantal na Africa kono. Gambia blato wala kono because ko Gambia no jama be je ni tamata ta America. Ye visa di la purita li fo la je wala ta conference wala. E ka stage le buka sonna sela na. So wayati na mansa kunda ko do men na America Donald Trump la malo ko to. Eko ite visa di la Gambian wala. Eko isa apply no le bari pour ya so ase kolea pour katama. Wa mo banku la luwalti. Ah ye men fana fo ay bolo bari ndela miralo momenti dunia momo nyanta opportunity so la katama kata dawda dia kata e doko kije o fatan fanso ndela miralo to na londo kamen tan no manya na sotola so america it always sembole jay kan drone so tubabu du fanan ko min ngam fo say europe fanala it will be la border la soron kan amanda border soron dam ma fanan na de banko dol mele la ko be north africa wala algeria ni libya iko la border ta ya kara fawol ma pour isaje mele alon ko ka bonan sahara kono lafta ka bate pour kana je isaje is also murundi so ko di bata ya di wala so basically it all el lafta men na pour ke fon la banko di ngol tanka ke ka do ko di la anu so da de se taran nemo nim bunya kono so ngaji ki control fanan africa na bankolu gambia kata banku ko tengol fana nyanta katal le ngado ko ke ngana banko de dame baje la ko fanni ke wolte hamela pour katama so on to kino la nimman kisi kisi ro ngaji be fanni ke lo sulala munala banko fana be sulala munala ya understand e baje la ko ningo ke ngana fo ngana banko de da nga fondin ke wolta nga balunya so ne ndiye mo do fana be hame mo jama fana be hame la pour kana kan banko jibe ka be nyame na dia ram fana en sa fo ko malla fi banko do mo fana na jang pour ka do ko ke wala malla fi nan na banko kan pour ka sabati because in diplomacy I believe in reciprocity nintela mansa kundati bi mitela be mansa kunda nya don kaya kam bi Burkina Faso men kin fana be wala kala you know ye consequence jumala bije but fana jiki ko america fana as a futa nyawnya wala europe fana futa nyawnya be interest do man din sot la gambia just like gambia fana ka interest to di nyame the prosity ni na banko dingol ban pour ka visa dila e fana la dingol tina jan ni bina je fana be sula la visa la en kara silo men fana bina silo la but between international relations experts also see UGB, Bantala na Joya Miroto from the perspective of borders actually. Bolkela.
Thank you so much, Comrade, for having you. It's been a pleasure, having discussion with you. And then I know we're gonna bring you back a couple of days time because Nim funding kill me the hatara. We will continue having this discussion. Puri saja ko sa ko ma fano nyami. Kuya fo nyami imamu le member kan kenyana ko kachala jere kaje ko ni wafolam. Dulu ka fol kamenke ni wafot but I mean I believe in the conviction that ni wafolam. Though even though migration to me it is not illegal. There's not like illegal migration because in 1600 tibabo ni arabo na africa kabibi
Tommy.
na in atale mon exploit at the end of the day they went back and then nobody called that illegal moving to any part of the world you can go anywhere you want to go but it has to be in a safest way to go so we would encourage ndogeri mi an okay but karamonto what would be your last word to those young guys me an okay that can school be grade 9 grade 7 if one see any time you don't face a time like you know
Also be ali karang ali domang alkana koronto. Tumando be alaba alfasa ala alsa menti ala yukani. So dewla na yamu different kili.
thank you comrade thank you so much
Abaraka bake ali abaraka.
it's a pleasure having you
You're welcome.